You know that feeling. You walk into a quiet room after like a really long, noisy day,
Mm-hmm.
and almost instantly there's this urge to fill it up again.
Yeah.
Phone out, music on, TV, anything but just
Yeah.
quiet. Have you ever noticed that? That
Yeah.
instinct, like the silence itself is, I don't know, something we need to push away.
Oh, absolutely. It's a really common thing, isn't it? That automatic reach for noise, for distraction. The second things go still, it
Yeah.
makes you wonder, well, what is it about that quiet that feels so maybe unsettling?
Exactly. Unsettling is the word. And that's really what we wanted to get into today, exploring this relationship we have with silence, maybe looking at it through a Gestalt lens.
Mm-hmm. Which is perfect because Gestalt is so much about awareness, right?
Right.
About noticing what's happening right now. And that urge to fill the silence, that's a fascinating right now moment to explore.
It feels like more than just preferring sound, doesn't it? It feels like we're actively, maybe unconsciously, trying to avoid something that lives in the quiet.
I think so. Because silence,
Really?
well, isn't actually empty, is it?
No.
It's often quite full of all the things we've maybe been too busy, too distracted to really pay attention to. Thoughts, feelings, little nudges, questions.
Yeah, like stuff bubbling up. You used that analogy before, like bubbles rising in still water. Things that were there all along but weren't visible until the churning stopped.
Precisely. When everything's noisy and agitated externally, it's hard to see what's going on internally, but when that external noise fades, suddenly you can see what's settled at the bottom or what's floating up.
And let's be honest, sometimes what floats up isn't exactly comfortable.
Usually not initially.
That's when I get that restless feeling, that sudden need to check my phone or remember an urgent email or suddenly decide the kitchen needs cleaning right now. Anything but just sitting with whatever that is.
Uh-huh. And that restlessness, that urge to fidget or escape, in Gestalt terms, we might see that as resistance.
Resistance.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a signal that we're bumping up against something. Maybe something unfamiliar, maybe something that feels a bit threatening to our usual way of being, our sense of being in control.
Because silence kind of strips away our usual defenses or
Mm.
distractions.
Exactly. It takes away the external focus and turns us inward. And if we're not used to looking inward, or if there are things there we've been avoiding, well, resistance makes sense. It's protective in a way.
So why do we resist so fiercely sometimes? What might we be running from in that quiet?
Oh, it could be so many things. Unfinished business, maybe grief we haven't fully processed, or anger we were taught to swallow. Sometimes it's even just a fundamental fear about who we are without all the doing, all the noise.
Facing ourselves, essentially.
Facing ourselves. And that can feel daunting. Silence can act like a mirror, reflecting back things we might not be ready or willing to see.
It's such a paradox, though, isn't it?
How so?
Well, the very thing we're running from might actually hold the key to something we need. The feeling we avoid might be the feeling that needs acknowledging to move forward.
Precisely. What we resist persists, as the saying goes. The energy we put into not feeling, not being quiet, could potentially be redirected into simply being present with what is, even for a moment.
It makes me think of that story you mentioned about the client who always had to have background noise. Music, podcasts, anything.
Ah, yes.
And when they finally allowed for real silence, what came up was this profound, almost overwhelming sense of loneliness they hadn't even realized was there.
Exactly. They were using the noise to unconsciously manage or avoid that deep feeling. The resistance, the constant need for sound was masking the core issue. And allowing the silence, as difficult as it was initially, was the first step towards actually meeting that loneliness and understanding it.
Wow. So it's an invitation then, maybe, for anyone listening, just to notice. When silence falls, what's your immediate impulse? What do you reach for? And maybe, just maybe, wonder gently what you might be trying not to hear. Not with judgment, just curiosity.
Gentle curiosity, that's the perfect phrase, because this isn't about forcing ourselves into uncomfortable silence, but about becoming curious about our own patterns.
Okay, so we've talked about escaping silence.
Yeah.
But what about looking at silence differently? Not just as nothing, but as something, a presence.
Yes, let's shift there. Silence isn't just the absence of noise. It can have a quality, a weight, a presence all its own. And thinking about the Gestalt cycle of experience can be helpful here.
Remind me of that cycle again.
Sure. It generally flows from sensation, noticing something, to awareness, recognizing what it is, then mobilization of energy, taking action, making contact, and finally withdrawal or integration.
Okay.
Now, in our busy lives, we often interrupt that cycle. We might feel a sensation but push away awareness, or we might act but never really make full contact or integrate the experience properly.
So we have unfinished business.
Exactly. Unfinished cycles and silence. It often brings us right back to that awareness point for all those interrupted cycles. We suddenly become aware of the tension, the unresolved feeling, the thing we didn't fully process earlier because the next stimulus came along.
And that awareness in silence can feel intense because we're not immediately jumping to the next thing.
Right. We shift from that constant external focus to an internal one. And that internal landscape might hold emotions or sensations that feel overwhelming precisely because they haven't been allowed to complete their natural cycle.
You mentioned creative adjustments earlier. How do they fit into this avoidance of what silence brings up?
Yes. Creative adjustments are basically the clever, often unconscious strategies we developed, usually way back, to cope with difficult environments or relationships.
Like survival strategies.
Exactly. For instance, a child growing up where anger wasn't allowed might learn to suppress it really effectively. That's a creative adjustment. It helped them survive that environment. But then, as an adult sitting in silence, that suppressed anger might start to surface. Not necessarily as a clear thought of I'm angry, but maybe as like a clenched jaw or a knot in the stomach or sudden irritability. The body remembers the pattern, even if the conscious mind doesn't link it directly.
So the silence allows these old patterns, these physical echoes of past adjustments, to become noticeable.
It can, yes. And we might be avoiding multiple layers in the silence, not just one feeling, but perhaps a tangle of unfinished business, old adjustments, and also our projections onto silence itself.
Projections, like what we think silence means.
Yeah. Fears and assumptions, maybe associating silence with being alone or with failure or boredom or judgment. We project these ideas onto the quiet, making it feel even more unwelcoming.
So it's worth asking ourselves, what is my personal flavor of silence? What comes up for me? Peace, anxiety, a critical inner voice.
Absolutely. And just observing that, again, without judgment, noticing your unique associations. Is silence a friend, an enemy, or just unexplored territory?
And that resistance we talked about, sometimes it's not overt distraction like grabbing the phone. Sometimes it's just relentless busyness, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. Filling every single moment. Work, chores, social plans, hobbies, never leaving a gap. It's a highly effective, often socially acceptable way to avoid stillness.
To avoid potentially meeting whatever lies beneath the activity.
And again, the paradox. The more energy we pour into avoiding the stillness, the more power we give to whatever it is we're trying not to confront. It hums away underneath it all.
That reminds me of the other story you shared, the one about the person trying meditation.
Yes, the one who felt physically ill.
Yeah, every time they tried to sit quietly, they'd get nauseous or feel intense anxiety. It wasn't just fidgety, it was like a physical rejection of the stillness.
And it turned out, through exploring that resistance, that the silence was triggering deeply buried memories from childhood. Feelings of being ignored, unseen, unheard. Their whole adult life, the constant motion, was an unconscious attempt to avoid re-experiencing that feeling of invisibility, of neglect.
Wow, so the resistance itself, that strong physical reaction, was the clue. It was the way in.
Exactly. The body was screaming, "Don't go there." But by gently approaching why it was screaming, they could start to uncover and tend to those old wounds. The silence, initially unbearable, became the space where they could begin to reclaim their voice, to acknowledge what had happened.
And that really hits home, that Gestalt idea. Awareness brings choice. Once we see the pattern, when it gets quiet, I immediately need to get busy and I feel this tightness in my chest. We're no longer just automatically reacting. We have a moment, a space to choose differently. Maybe not always, maybe not easily, but the possibility of choice emerges.
Precisely. It's not about suddenly forcing yourself to endure hours of silence if that feels terrifying. It's about tiny moments of awareness. The next time you feel that pull to escape the quiet, maybe just pause, just for one breath. Notice what's happening in your body. Where do you feel the urge? Is it tension? Heat? A flutter? What if you just stayed with that physical sensation for 5 more seconds with curiosity? What might you learn?
Honoring the body's wisdom, in a way.
Yes. Listening to its signals rather than immediately trying to shut them down.
Okay, so we've looked at running from silence and the voices or feelings we might be avoiding. What happens when we actually start to turn towards it? When we create a bit more space in the silence?
Well, this is where we can really lean into the Gestalt idea of contact.
Contact usually means with other people.
Right. It does, but it also means contact with oneself. Really fully meeting your own present moment, experience thoughts, feelings, sensations with openness, with curiosity. And silence provides this incredible opportunity for deep self-contact.
Because the external noise is dialed down.
Exactly. When the outer world quiets, the inner world can be heard more clearly. It's a chance to connect with parts of ourselves that usually get drowned out. The quieter parts, the neglected parts.
And that's where insight, maybe even healing, can start to happen.
I believe so. When we stop reacting and start simply being with what's there, maybe it's sadness, maybe it's a flicker of unexpected joy, maybe it's a creative idea, maybe it's just a deep sense of fatigue we haven't acknowledged, we start to know ourselves more fully.
It feels like peeling back layers again. The noise keeps us at the surface, maybe. And silence lets us access something deeper, more essential.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It strips away the non-essential sometimes. It allows us to connect with what feels more authentic, more resonant within us.
So embracing the silence, even with its potential discomfort, can paradoxically lead to more clarity, more connection.
Yes, it's that recurring theme. Leaning into the discomfort often opens up space for something new to emerge. Clarity, insight, a sense of peace, self-compassion. It can all start to find room in that quiet space.
And thinking about healing, it's not about getting rid of the bad parts, is it?
Not in Gestalt, no. Healing is much more about integration, bringing all the fragmented pieces of ourselves, the parts we like and the parts we've disowned, into a more cohesive, aware whole. Silence can be a powerful container for that. It allows us to feel and acknowledge all parts of our experience without needing to immediately fix or change them.
And it's important to stress this isn't always easy or straightforward.
Oh, absolutely not. It's often messy, non-linear. There will definitely be times when silence feels unbearable, when the urge to distract is overwhelming. And that's okay. That's part of the process, too. Growth isn't a straight line upwards.
Right. You made a point earlier about how trying too hard to figure it all out in the silence can actually be another form of resistance.
Yes. That intellectualizing, trying to analyze every single flicker of feeling. Sometimes that itself is a way to avoid simply being with the raw experience. The greatest courage sometimes is just to show up in the uncertainty and the not knowing and just be present. Just be. That space between the silence and our usual sense of self, that gap, that's often where the real transformation happens. In the allowing, not the forcing.
So a practical starting point then, for someone listening who feels a little resonance with this.
Maybe just start incredibly small. Tiny. Find one moment today, maybe just 60 seconds, where you deliberately don't fill the quiet. Sit down, stand by a window, whatever. No agenda, no goal, other than to just be there and notice. What do you notice in your body? What thoughts drift by? No need to do anything about them, just notice.
That stillness, even for a minute, can be enough to start.
It really can, because silence ultimately offers this chance to see ourselves more clearly. It's like a mirror without the usual filters of distraction and busyness.
And that clarity, even if it feels a bit raw or unfamiliar at first, it's empowering, isn't it?
Deeply empowering. It leads to greater self-awareness, which, as we said, brings choice, more agency in our own lives.
So silence isn't the end point. It's not this void to be feared or filled. It's more like a doorway.
Exactly, a doorway. And what's on the other side is unique for everyone. Maybe it's acceptance, maybe forgiveness, maybe deeper love, maybe just a quieter mind. It's a personal discovery.
Which leads to maybe a final thought to leave people with. Instead of fighting the silence or rushing to fill it, maybe just hold a gentle question. What does silence want to teach me today?
Oh, I love.
Just let the question hang there. No pressure for an answer. Just let it unfold.
Because the answers ultimately aren't usually found in the noise outside. They're often waiting patiently, quietly within us.
So the real question is,
are you ready to listen?